My niece and I half sit, half stand at a center island in the kitchen. She draws a line or shape on a piece of paper, and then I look at it and I add to that shape with my marker or pencil. Back over to her, and she quickly pencils in some other shape. Now it's really looking like something. I just don't know what it is. I'm an artist and I can draw, but this kind of situation always puts me in peril. There are a lot of expectations. I hesitate just a little, but I turn the paper and see my opportunity. I think we have a direction now. But she turns the paper and we are headed in a new direction. A spontaneous exercise on a piece of paper. Improvisational art. Thinking new, adapting, each time seeing for the first time how things might work out. What if we were to improvise in our lives in this way and in our connections with each other? Open to what is possible, adding to what is possible, like a child's game, like a Picasso masterpiece. Life While You Wait by Wisława Szymborska. Performance without rehearsal, body without alterations, head without premeditation. I know nothing of the role I play. I only know it's mine. I can't exchange it. I have to guess on the spot just what this play is all about. Ill-prepared for the privilege of living, I can barely keep up with the pace that the action demands. I improvise, although I loathe improvisation. I trip at every step over my own ignorance. I can't conceal my hayseed manners. My instincts are for happy histrionics. Stage fright makes excuses for me, which humiliate me more. Extenuating circumstances strike me as cruel. Words and impulses you can't take back. Stars you'll never get counted. Your character, like a raincoat you button on the run. The pitiful results of all this unexpectedness. If only I could just rehearse one Wednesday in advance, or repeat a single Thursday that has passed. But here comes Friday with a script I haven't seen. It isn't fair, I ask, my voice a little hoarse, since I couldn't even clear my throat off stage. You'd be wrong to think that it's just a slapdash quiz, taken in makeshift accommodations. Oh no, I'm standing on the set and I see how strong it is. The props are surprisingly precise. The machine rotating the stage has been around even longer. The farthest galaxies have been turned on. Oh no, there's no question. This must be the premiere, and whatever I do will become forever what I've done.
I learned just before the service today that Lori and Brooke, who are doing these amazing duets for us today, my understanding is that, Brooke, you were Lori's student starting at 9 years old, many moons ago, and now they are performing this incredible music together. I think it's very fitting that we've got duets today as we talk about improv and all of the things that are happening. So usually, they bring me in to do some sort of searing social justice sermon. You've all seen me do this. I said to Luke when he asked me to preach, I said, is it okay if I don't talk at all about justice, but instead I talk about comedy? He said, yes, please, come on in. So, and now for something completely different. So, many of you don't know me, but for those of you who do, it probably won't come as a huge surprise to hear that I was a really big theater nerd in high school, and that I have a little bit of a flair for the dramatic. So after I graduated from high school, went off to college, I was desperately seeking something in my first semester that would be fun and familiar. And so I decided to audition for some theater shows. The audition process at my university was called common casting. And what it meant is that there was a week during which all of the shows that were happening in a particular semester would all hold their auditions at the same time. And so you'd read the little blurbs about each play, and you'd sign up for as many auditions as you wanted to do. Most semesters, there were something like 20 or 30 shows happening on campus in various different ways. So, as an overly eager freshman, and not knowing how competitive the casting would be or how to determine which shows were legitimate and which ones we should really stay away from, my strategy was just throw it at the wall, right? Try out for everything and see what sticks. So I was game for anything. And so what happened is every night you'd go down to the theater, you just sort of sign up, they call your name, you come in. And on the second or third night of Common Casting Week, I walked through yet another audition door. I had no idea what I was walking into. And there was this group of 6 or 7 people sitting there, and one of them said, "Welcome to On Thin Ice, comedy improv troupe. Are you ready to play?" And I panicked. I had seen plenty of improv at the local comedy sports club, and on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Any of you ever see that show? Yeah. But all that experience had done was to make me realize exactly how not funny and not improvisational I was. So I got in there, they say this to me, I'm like, sorry, I didn't realize that this was an improv audition, and I didn't mean I gotta go. And I started walking out the door. And of course, they say, come on, we've been in here all night, we've only had a few auditions, and let me tell you, there is no way you could possibly be worse than the people we've already seen. So listen, even if improv isn't your thing, just look at this as a warm-up for your other auditions, and besides, this is gonna be more fun than anything else you do tonight. So how many of you have seen improv comedy in one way or another? Wow, okay, funny loving group, this is great. So On Thin Ice, this comedy troupe did what's known as short-form improv, okay? And these are short scenes that are made up on the spot by the actors who are a part of them, and they're following the rules of a number of different games, okay? So there are games like Shoulda Said, right? Where an actor will say a line like, "I'm going to the store today," and the MC will clap and say, "Shoulda said," and the actor has to make a new choice on the spot, like, "I'm going to the moon today." So will you do this with me? Shoulda said. All right, let's try one more time. Here we go. Shoulda said. Okay, so I'm going to the store today. Shoulda said. I'm going to the moon today. Shoulda said. I'm not going anywhere today. There's a Golden Girls marathon on TV. Then there are games like, that was really good, by the way, thank you. There are games like Musical Nightmare, where actors will be in the middle of a scene and the MC will freeze them and make them sing a song based on the last line that they said, but in a genre like 1950s doo-wop or country or children's song. Then there are games like Forwards, Backwards, Plus, where actors will create a short scene and the MC will ask them to play it back word for word, forwards and backwards, but each time in a different genre, like daytime soap opera or foreign language monster movie or slasher film. So short form improv is extremely interactive. Usually the actors will ask the audience for a suggestion, like a place or an object or an activity, anything to get it going. And the audience also comes up with the genres in the kinds of games that I was just talking about. Does this sound complicated? Yeah. Well, when you're watching these expert improvisers, like if you've ever seen Wayne Brady, for example, do this shtick, it's like magic, okay? All of these components come together and the actors create these hilarious and coherent scenes that follow the rules and incorporate these suggestions brilliantly. But as you can imagine, this is actually a craft. And it takes a while to master, and so it might just be a little overwhelming for somebody like me who accidentally walked through the door of an improv audition. So, long story short, but that night I stumbled through a number of games with my very patient scene partners. I'm pretty sure I was not particularly funny, and I do know that I was intensely nervous, but I did manage to bust out a few of my infamous accents, which is the one tool I have in my tool belt, and I'm going to spare you those today. And I worked pretty well with the other actors, and I survived. So I ended up actually getting called back for a second audition, and ultimately I got cast with 2 other freshmen as the newest members of On Thin Ice. And I stayed with the troupe for all 4 years of college, and I made some incredibly dear friends who are still in my life today. I have, in fact, married 2 of them now. Not personally, but, done. You have to clarify these things when you're a minister. I'm telling you this today because I have realized that for me, the experience of being trained in improv comedy is one of the most important skill sets that I have as a minister. I'd say it is more important than the courses that I took in Unitarian Universalist history or theology or family systems theory and pastoral counseling, truly. And I also want to say that these lessons aren't just applicable for ministers. I'd suggest that improv can give us some universal guidelines that could be healthy for all of us to consider as individuals and as a congregation. So, my friends, I present to you my list of rules from improv that I think could really be called All I Really Need to Know I Learned from Improv. And so here we go. Rule number 1, always say yes. This is the first rule of improv. Even if you've never done it, you've probably heard this rule at some point. It's the cardinal guideline that almost every improv expert will tell you, and the idea is when you're creating an impromptu scene with 2 or 3 people and they're trying to invent a reality that will both make sense and be funny, saying yes to the offers that your partners make to you is essential because it keeps things moving forward. So here's an example. I'm going to do a little exercise with you that I did that I got from an improv comedian who was doing a TED Talk. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and all you have to do is say yes. Okay? I know this is hard for Unitarian Universalists because you don't know what I'm going to say in advance, but I promise it's going to be okay. So we're going to practice, okay? 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Excellent. You're good at this. So here we go. Do you want to tell a story with me?
Yes.
Is it about a princess?
Yes.
A princess who's bored because her father, the king, won't let her have any adventures?
Yes.
Does she decide to escape the castle?
Yes.
Does she go into the forest?
Yes.
Does she fight villains? Befriend lovable misfits?
Yes.
Learn deep truths about herself and her abilities? Yes. Does she return home wiser and happier than she was when she left?
Yes.
Does she reign over her kingdom happily ever after?
Yes.
The end. Well done. We did that together. Well done. Now we're going to do it again this time, but this time I want you to say no to whatever I say. You ready? No. Very good. Do you want to tell a story with me?
No.
All right, fine. Think about it, outside of the improv context. You're sitting in a meeting, let's call it the board meeting or a task force meeting, and you're talking about how to solve some sort of nagging problem. Think about the difference between a conversation in which everyone tries on the ideas of the other people in the room, exploring them and seeing how they might work, or each idea that's proposed, seeing if there's any possibility in it. Think about the difference between that meeting and the meeting where everybody is set up to say no the minute they walk in the door. Have you ever been in that meeting? And every time somebody makes a suggestion, the room is like, no, that's not gonna work, or no, you're not addressing the real problem. Which meeting has more creative possibilities? It's the yes meeting, right? More opportunities for building relationships, finding out-of-the-box solutions. As Dave Morris says in that TED Talk that I took that exercise from, a series of yeses will take us somewhere. A series of no's doesn't even get started. So this brings us to the second life rule of improv, and it's actually an add-on to rule number 1. So rule number 2 is always say yes and. So imagine this scene. Whoo, it's a scorcher out there, isn't it, ma'am? Why, yes, Claude, and I forgot my parasol. Yes, and here we are in the middle of the desert on this stagecoach with nary a tree in sight. Yes, and with 100 miles to go until we reach Gilly Gulch. Yes, and if we get there and your delicate skin is as wrinkled as a lizard's rear end, your fiancé, Sheriff Barker's gonna kill me. Thank you. But do you see what happened there? Okay, so that was 6 lines of dialogue done by one person, but I think you probably have a pretty clear idea of what's happening in that scene, right? I didn't give you any narrative or any explanation, but you know who our characters are, you know where they are, what they're doing, and what the conflict is, right? And you know all of that because each character said yes and over and over again. They affirmed the reality that the other person created, and then they added something new. So the final product ends up being robust and vivid and creative and collaborative. But imagine this scene. Whoo, it's a scorcher out there, ma'am. No, it's not. It's 42 degrees and I'm a dude. It's done, right? See my point? In improv, like in real life, if people are more invested in being in control than in cooperating, or in making their ideas dominate more than hearing the interesting suggestions in a room, or if they're more interested in being right rather than being collaborative, all the creative scenarios this group might come up with just wither and die on the vine. So in the congregational context, think about it this way. Let's say you are talking with a group of people about how to revamp the hospitality program. Someone says, let's do a training for greeters so they know how to be welcoming to all kinds of different people. Think how differently the meeting would go if you replied yes, and let's also work on a visitors orientation program that we could do for 15 minutes after every service. Versus if you said, no, greeter training isn't necessary, let's do my idea instead, right? So this brings us to rule number 3. The success of a scene is shared by everybody. There's this legendary story about Joan Rivers many years ago. She, of course, was a stand-up comedian, right? Which is a very, very different thing than being an improv comedian. And stand-up is based on individual humor and pre-written jokes, and so it doesn't rely really on other people to participate in the creative process. So Joan Rivers came to guest star at Second City in Chicago, one of the most famous improv theaters in the country. And she was doing a scene with a veteran improv comedian. And her partner started the scene saying, honey, our baby is sick. And Joan retorted, we don't have a baby. Of course, the audience laughed and roared, and Joan got her laugh, but the scene was dead, right? And she had abandoned her partner on stage. A successful scene in improv is not one that produces one single star. It's not one in which the actors compete against each other for who can get the most one-liners in. It's not one that switches realities depending on who's speaking, with the actors trying to dominate the action and take control of the trajectory. A successful improv scene is one in which the players set each other up, and everyone gets their share of laughs. One in which the actors pay attention to the cues they're giving each other. They say yes to the offers their partner is making. It's a scene where actors help one another when a joke bombs, because there will always be a joke that bombs. It's a scene where together, by weaving back and forth in a highly attuned, perceptive dance of word and action and gesture, these actors can create an entire universe, an entire coherent world out of nothing. Everyone adding detail and creating something together greater than any one actor could have imagined by themselves. And at the end of a successful scene, the audience wonders, how did they do that? Are you sure there wasn't a script? They were all so good. Imagine if we had this attitude, this posture more often in our families, our jobs, our churches. If we surrendered to the currents of the group's energy, each contributing and listening and creating a shared reality together. If we were satisfied with the end product, the magical feeling of a successful idea or project or venture, rather than demanding that we receive individual credit for our part in it. At its best, I think improv is a model for a spiritually mature life. It reminds us to say yes as much as we possibly can, to always try to contribute something to the communal venture of building our shared reality, to remember that our success or failure is inextricably intertwined with that of every other person sharing the stage of life with us. Improv pushes us to take risks and push our comfort zones, and it assures us that if we fail, the scene will be over soon enough and we'll get to try again. That failing doesn't mean that we are failures. It reminds us to listen deeply to the cues that others give us, to be keenly aware that nobody can carry the whole scene by themselves. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that satisfaction and joy do not come from doing everything right, or having a definite plan, or being the most skilled person in a room. Rather, satisfaction and joy come when we relax, when we have fun, and trust that we are indeed headed somewhere meaningful together. When we risk trusting one another along the way, when we surrender ourselves with our whole beings to the magic of collaboration, imagination, and laughter. Whether or not any of us find ourselves on an improv stage in the near future, may we all find ways to play, to surrender, to co-create, to laugh, to say yes, and. May it be so. Blessed be, Ashe, and Amen, and Scene. Friends, will you find some way to connect with somebody near you, whether that is physically or spiritually? Remember this as you improvise your way through this precious life that we share, friends. Take risks. Collaborate, listen, imagine, laugh, give and take and give. And above all, say yes. Again and again and again. Go in peace, my friends, to love and to serve the world. Amen.